The auction papers were legitimate. Cyrus Blackwell had checked them 3 times at the courthouse before driving out here with his last $500 in dreams of salvation. But now, standing in the dusty driveway of what should be his property, watching curtains twitch behind windows that should be empty, he felt the familiar weight of life laughing at his desperation. The house was supposed to be abandoned. That's what the county clerk had told him. That's what the tax records showed. But smoke was rising from the chimney, and he could hear voices inside. Women's voices, and children crying. Cyrus cut the engine of his battered pickup truck and stepped onto land that belonged to him according to every legal document in Texas. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the property that stretched as far as he could see. 200 acres of scrubland, and possibility that he'd bought for less than most people spent on dinner. For 3 months since losing his construction job when the housing market tanked, he'd been living in his truck and showering at truck stops. This land was supposed to be his fresh start, his chance to build something real. The front door of the farmhouse opened, and a woman emerged. She was maybe 40, with graying hair pulled back severely and arms crossed like she was preparing for war. Behind her, more women appeared. He counted quickly, 10 total, ranging from teenagers to elderly, some holding children. They lined up on the porch like a human barrier between him and his investment. "You must be the new owner," the woman called out, her voice carrying an accent he couldn't place. Mexican, maybe, or Central American. "I'm Elena. We need to talk." Cyrus pulled the deed from his shirt pocket, the paper already damp with sweat. "Ma'am, I think there's been some mistake. This is private property now, my property. I bought it fair and square at the tax auction." "No mistake," Elena replied, stepping down from the porch. The other women followed, creating a semicircle around him. "We know exactly who you are and why you're here. Question is, do you know who we are?" The youngest woman, barely out of her teens, was holding a baby that couldn't be more than 6 months old. An older woman with silver hair kept her hand protectively on the shoulder of what looked like her granddaughter. They weren't squatters or trespassers. They moved like people who belonged here, like people who had nowhere else to go. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Cyrus said, folding the deed carefully. "But I've got plans for this place. Legal plans. I need you all to pack up your things and find somewhere else to stay." Elena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Find somewhere else." She turned to the other women, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Several of them shook their heads, and one of them stepped forward. "Mister," she said, her English heavily accented, "you think you bought empty land, but you bought our home, and we're not leaving until you understand why we can't." That's when Cyrus noticed something that made his stomach drop. Every single window of the house had thick curtains drawn tight, and every woman standing before him kept glancing nervously at the road behind him, like they were watching for something, or someone. The nervousness in their eyes wasn't the kind that came from being caught somewhere they shouldn't be. This was fear, raw, practiced fear that came from experience with real danger. "What exactly are you watching for?" Cyrus asked, following their glances toward the empty dirt road that led back to the highway. The question seemed to hit them like a physical blow. Several women stepped closer together, forming a tighter protective circle around the younger ones with children. Elena exchanged a look with the silver-haired woman before responding. "We watch for cars that don't belong, trucks that slow down too much when they pass, men who ask too many questions in town about who lives out here. But I'm here now," Cyrus said, spreading his arms to indicate the obvious. "I own this place. You can't just stay here because you're scared of something." The youngest woman with the baby spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand. This isn't just somewhere we're staying. This is where we run to. Run to, not run from." Cyrus felt pieces of something larger clicking into place in his mind, though he couldn't quite see the full picture yet. The way they moved together, the careful positioning so no one was isolated, the fact that there were no men anywhere on the property. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Some of us 3 years," Elena answered. "Others just arrived last week. Time doesn't matter. What matters is that we're safe here." "Safe from what?" The women looked at each other again, that same silent communication passing between them. The older woman with silver hair finally stepped forward. "From the men who used to own us," she said quietly. "From the husbands who put us in hospitals. From the boyfriends who said they'd find us no matter where we went." The weight of understanding hit Cyrus like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just a house. It was a refuge. These women hadn't stumbled onto his property by accident. They'd found it deliberately, turned it into something that hadn't existed when he'd bought it sight unseen, based on county records and tax documents. "This is some kind of shelter," he said, not really asking. "Unofficial," Elena confirmed. "No government funding, no official recognition. Just women helping women. When someone needs to disappear, we make sure they can." Cyrus felt his grand plans for selling the property and starting fresh crumbling around him. "But I need this land. I lost everything. This was supposed to be my way back up. And what about our way to stay alive?" the young mother asked, adjusting her baby against her chest. "You think you can just show up with papers and erase what we've built?" Before Cyrus could answer, the sound of an approaching vehicle made every woman freeze. A black SUV was turning off the highway, moving slowly down the dirt road toward them. Elena grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Get inside," she hissed. "Now. If they see you here, everything changes." Cyrus found himself pushed through the front door and into a house that looked nothing like what he'd expected. The interior had been transformed into something between a home and a small community center. Mattresses lined the living room floor, children's toys scattered between them. The kitchen table was covered with legal documents, job applications, and what looked like court papers. This wasn't squatting. This was organized survival. "Stay away from the windows," Elena whispered, positioning herself to peek through a crack in the curtains. The other women had scattered throughout the house with practiced efficiency. Some herded children into back rooms, others took positions near other windows, and the silver-haired woman was already on her phone, speaking in urgent Spanish. "Who is it?" Cyrus asked, but Elena held up a hand for silence. The SUV pulled into the driveway and stopped exactly where Cyrus had parked his truck. Through the narrow gap in the curtains, he could see a man in an expensive suit climbing out of the driver's seat. The man looked around the property with the calculating gaze of someone appraising value, not searching for people. "Real estate developer?" Elena said, her voice tight with disgust. "Marcus Hoffman. He's been trying to buy this land for months." "Buy it from who?" "I own it now." Elena turned to look at him, and for the first time since he'd arrived, there was something that might have been sympathy in her eyes. "You think you're the first person to buy this property at auction?" "Hoffman has a system. He finds rural properties with tax problems, waits for them to go to auction, then either buys them himself or finds someone desperate enough to be his front man." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "You're saying I was set up. I'm saying a man with your financial problems doesn't usually have $500 in cash to spend on land sight unseen, unless someone told you exactly when and where to be." Cyrus thought back to the conversation at the unemployment office. The helpful clerk who'd mentioned the tax auction, the way the bidding had gone. He'd thought he was being smart, aggressive, seizing opportunity. Now it felt like he'd been dancing to music someone else was playing. The man outside was walking the perimeter of the house now, occasionally stopping to take pictures with his phone. He moved like someone who already owned the place, like the current occupants were just a temporary inconvenience to be cleared away. "What does he want with this land?" Cyrus asked. "Strip mall," the young mother said from the kitchen doorway. "Gas station, fast food, maybe a dollar store. He's been buying up everything between here and the highway expansion." "But if I own it legally, do you?" Elena challenged. "Really? Because men like Hoffman don't leave things to chance. If you bought this property, it's because he wanted you to. Question is, what did you agree to do that you don't remember agreeing to do?" Cyrus pulled out his phone and found the number for Tom Bradley, the man who'd helped him through the auction paperwork. The phone rang once before going to voicemail, a voicemail that was suddenly full, as if the number had been disconnected. Outside, Hoffman was walking back to his SUV, but instead of leaving, he was making a phone call, and he was looking directly at the house with a smile that made Cyrus's skin crawl. The realization hit Cyrus like ice water. He'd been played from the beginning. Every conversation, every helpful suggestion, every piece of advice that had led him to this auction had been carefully orchestrated. The unemployment office clerk who'd mentioned the tax sale, the helpful stranger at the courthouse who'd explained the bidding process, even the gas station attendant who'd given him directions to this property, had seemed unusually knowledgeable about the area. "How long has this been going on?" he asked Elena, who was still watching Hoffman through the window. 6 months, maybe more. He buys properties through intermediates, then pressures them to sell to him for development. Usually works because most people who buy at tax auctions are investors looking for quick profit. What happens to people who don't sell? Elena's expression grew darker. Accidents, Code violations that appear overnight, zoning problems that didn't exist before, tax assessments that triple without explanation. Hoffman has connections throughout the county government. Cyrus felt his last hope slipping away. So either I sell to him, or he destroys me financially. That's been his pattern, the silver-haired woman said, approaching from the kitchen. I'm Maria Santos. I used to work for the county planning office before I ended up here. I've seen Hoffman's methods firsthand. You worked for the county? What happened? Maria's laugh was bitter. I refused to approve a zoning variance that would have displaced a low-income housing complex. Next thing I knew, there were allegations about missing funds, an investigation that destroyed my reputation, and a husband who decided I was too much trouble to stand by. The pattern was becoming clear. Hoffman didn't just manipulate property deals. He destroyed anyone who got in his way, systematically and thoroughly. And somehow, Cyrus had walked directly into his web. But I have legal ownership, Cyrus said. Though even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow. The deed is legitimate. Legal ownership only matters if you can afford to defend it, Elena pointed out. How much money do you have left after buying this place? Cyrus didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. He was broke. Completely, utterly broke. If Hoffman wanted to challenge his ownership in court, or bury him in legal fees, or simply make his life miserable through bureaucratic warfare, Cyrus had no resources to fight back. Outside, Hoffman finished his phone call and climbed back into his SUV, but instead of leaving, he pulled out a tablet and began typing something, sending reports to someone, or maybe filing paperwork that would start the process of making Cyrus's life a nightmare. He's going to start the pressure campaign today, Maria observed. Probably have inspectors here by the end of the week, citing violations that will cost more than you paid for the property to fix. So what are my options? Cyrus asked. Elena turned away from the window to face him directly. You can sell to Hoffman, take whatever he offers, and walk away. Or you can fight him. But fighting him means protecting us, because if he gets this land, the first thing he'll do is call immigration services and the sheriff to clear out what he'll call illegal squatters. That's when Cyrus's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was simple, direct, and terrifying. Sell to me by Friday or lose everything. This is your only warning. Cyrus stared at the message on his phone, reading it 3 times as the words sank in. Friday, 3 days away. The threat wasn't subtle or open to interpretation. It was a countdown to his destruction. He doesn't waste time, Elena observed, reading over his shoulder. That's his standard opening move. Establish contact, set deadline, start the pressure. What kind of pressure? Cyrus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Check your email, Maria suggested grimly. He's probably already filed complaints. Cyrus opened his email app and felt his stomach drop. 7 new messages had arrived in the past hour. Building code violations pending investigation. Environmental concerns requiring immediate soil testing at his expense. Tax assessment review scheduled for emergency hearing. Each message carried official letterheads and threatened substantial fines, if not addressed immediately. This is impossible, he said, scrolling through the list. I've owned this place for less than 12 hours. Hoffman has people throughout the county government, Maria explained. Inspectors who owe him favors, clerks who look the other way, assessors who adjust values based on phone calls rather than actual property reviews. The young mother, who Cyrus had learned was named Rosa, was sitting at the kitchen table feeding her baby. He did the same thing to the family who owned this place before. Nice people, had been here for 20 years. Within 2 weeks of refusing to sell, they had inspections, lawsuits, and a tax bill that tripled overnight. What happened to them? Foreclosure, Rosa said quietly. Lost everything. That's when we found this place, and decided it could be our sanctuary. Cyrus looked around the house with new eyes. These women hadn't just stumbled onto his property. They had created something intentional and necessary from what someone else had lost to the same system now targeting him. How many women have stayed here? He asked. Over the years, maybe 40, Elena answered. Some for a few weeks while they got back on their feet. Others for months while court cases went through the system. A few became permanent because they had nowhere else that was safe. And you handle this all yourselves? No funding, no official support? Maria laughed bitterly. You think the same county government that enables Hoffman is going to officially support a shelter for women escaping domestic violence? Half the men in power have friends who've been through messy divorces. The other half think women who get beaten must have deserved it somehow. Cyrus's phone buzzed again. Another email, this time from a legal firm he'd never heard of, informing him that his property ownership was being contested due to irregularities in the tax auction process. They demanded he cease all activities on the property pending resolution of the dispute. "How is this legal?" he asked. "It's not," Elena said simply. "But legal and possible are two different things. Hoffman has money, connections, and time. Most people he targets have none of those things. They take whatever settlement he offers and disappear. But I can't take a settlement," Cyrus realized aloud. "I put everything I had into buying this place. If I sell now, I'll get maybe half back, and that won't be enough to start over anywhere else." The women exchanged glances. For the first time since he'd arrived, he wasn't talking about his rights as an owner or their obligation to leave. He was starting to understand that they were all trapped in the same system. "So what do we do?" he asked, and the pronoun shift wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The answer to Cyrus's question came sooner than anyone expected. Elena was explaining the legal resources they'd used in the past, when the sound of multiple vehicles approaching made everyone freeze. Through the window, they could see a convoy of official trucks pulling into the driveway. Building inspectors, environmental assessors, and a sheriff's deputy. "Hoffman moves fast when he's motivated," Maria said, already gathering legal documents from the kitchen table. "Everyone who doesn't have proper documentation needs to get to the back bedrooms. Now." The house transformed into organized chaos. Women and children scattered with practiced efficiency, some disappearing entirely while others took positions near phones and legal paperwork. Elena thrust a folder into Cyrus's hands. "Property deed, tax receipts, and purchase documentation," she said. "Don't volunteer any information. Answer only direct questions. Don't let them separate you from the paperwork." Cyrus felt overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility. "What about you? What if they ask about who lives here?" "I'm your property manager," Elena said without hesitation. "Hired to maintain the house while you decide on development plans. Rosa is my assistant. Everyone else is either visiting or already gone." The knock on the door was loud and official. Cyrus opened it to find 3 men in county uniforms and a sheriff's deputy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Blackwell?" the lead inspector asked. "I'm Frank Morrison, county building inspector. We've received complaints about potential code violations on this property. We need to conduct an immediate safety inspection." "What kind of complaints?" Cyrus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Electrical safety concerns, possible septic system failures, and reports of overcrowding," Morrison read from his clipboard. "We also have environmental assessment requirements due to proximity to watershed areas." Cyrus knew none of these issues had existed 24 hours ago, but challenging them would only make things worse. "Of course, the property is yours to inspect." For the next hour, he watched as the inspectors found problems that couldn't possibly be real. Electrical outlets that were somehow no longer up to code despite being recently installed. A septic system that had miraculously developed concerns overnight. Structural issues that required immediate attention. During the inspection, Rosa approached him quietly in the kitchen. "My real name is Rosita Santos," she said. "I came here 6 months ago with my baby after my ex-husband put me in the emergency room for the 3rd time. The police told me that unless I had witnesses, it was my word against his, and he was a respected member of the community." "What community?" Cyrus asked. He was a sheriff's deputy in the next county over. "Same department that's supposed to protect women like me." She glanced toward the deputy who had accompanied the inspectors. "Sometimes the system that's supposed to help you is run by the same people you're running from." The implication hit Cyrus like a physical blow. The deputy outside wasn't just here to observe an inspection. He was probably reporting back to networks that connected to the very men these women were hiding from. "How do you stay safe?" he asked. "We help each other disappear," Rosita explained. "New names, new towns, new lives when necessary, but it takes time to build those new identities, and we need somewhere safe while we do it." The inspector appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a list that had grown substantially during his tour of the house. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm afraid we found numerous violations that require immediate remediation. The estimated cost for repairs is approximately $47,000. You have 30 days to complete the work or face condemnation proceedings." $47,000. More than Cyrus had made in his last 2 years of construction work combined. The number wasn't random. It was precisely calculated to be impossible for him to meet. After the inspectors left, Cyrus sat at the kitchen table staring at the violation notice. $47,000. 30 days. The numbers felt like a death sentence. But something Elena had said earlier kept echoing in his mind. Hoffman had used this same pattern on the previous owners. "Maria," he called out, "you said you used to work for the county planning office. Do you still have access to any records?" Maria emerged from the back room where she'd been hiding during the inspection. "Not officially, but I know people who might help." "Why?" "Because if Hoffman has been doing this systematically, there has to be a paper trail. Multiple properties, multiple complaints filed on the same timeline, same inspectors finding the same violations." Cyrus was thinking out loud now. Construction worker logic applied to bureaucratic warfare. In construction, when you see the same defect in multiple buildings, it's usually not the buildings that are the problem. Elena caught on immediately. "You think the inspections themselves are fraudulent? I think they're coordinated. Look at this list." Cyrus spread the violation notice across the table. Electrical problems that require complete rewiring, septic issues that require total replacement, structural concerns that need foundation work. These aren't maintenance problems. These are complete reconstruction projects. Rosa joined them, her baby finally asleep. "The family before us got almost the exact same list. Mrs. Henderson showed me the papers before they lost the place." "How many properties has Hoffman acquired in the past 2 years?" Cyrus asked. Maria was already pulling out her phone. "Let me call someone." She dialed a number and spoke quietly in Spanish for several minutes before hanging up. 12 properties, all bought at tax auctions, all developed into commercial projects within 18 months. And all the previous owners got violation notices? Every single one. Same inspectors, same violations, same impossible repair costs. Cyrus felt pieces clicking together. What if we documented the pattern? Showed that the same inspector is finding identical problems on different properties owned by different people. "You'd need evidence," Elena pointed out. "Official records. Documentation that proves the violations are systematic rather than legitimate." "I might be able to help with that." The voice came from the doorway, where an older woman Cyrus hadn't seen before was standing. She was maybe 60, with short gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "I'm Judge Patricia Reeves, retired. I've been staying here since last month." Cyrus stared at her. "You're a judge?" "Was. Until I started asking questions about why certain developers always seem to win their appeals while homeowners always seem to lose theirs." Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Turns out questioning judicial patterns isn't popular with men who profit from predictable outcomes." "What happened?" "My husband decided that a wife who made enemies wasn't worth the social cost. The divorce was nasty, and suddenly I was unemployed, divorced, and dealing with threats that made it clear I should disappear quietly." Elena had been listening with growing excitement. "Patricia, if we could prove systematic fraud in the inspection process, we could get an emergency injunction stopping all pending violation proceedings," Patricia finished. "And if we could demonstrate that Hoffman has been using fraudulent complaints to force property acquisitions, we could get criminal charges filed." Cyrus felt hope stirring for the first time since arriving at the property. "What do we need to do?" Patricia was already moving toward the kitchen table, her judicial mind engaged. "We need comparative documentation, inspection reports from all 12 properties, timeline correlation between complaints filed and acquisition dates. And we need someone willing to testify about the coordination between Hoffman and county officials." "I can testify," Maria said without hesitation. "I saw the system from the inside. And I can provide legal framework," Patricia added. "But we'll need to move fast. If we're going to stop this, we have to do it before Friday." Thursday afternoon, less than 24 hours before Hoffman's deadline, Patricia walked into the county courthouse with a briefcase full of evidence and a legal motion that would change everything. Cyrus waited in his truck outside, phone ready to coordinate with Elena and Maria, who were documenting the final pieces of evidence they needed. The comparative analysis had been devastating. 12 properties, 12 identical inspection reports, 12 impossible repair estimates. Same inspector, same violations, same timeline pattern. Most damning of all, Maria's contact in the planning office had confirmed that renovation permits for Hoffman's developments were approved within days of foreclosure proceedings. Suggesting advanced coordination, Patricia's motion requested an emergency hearing to halt all pending violations and investigate systematic fraud in the county inspection process. More importantly, It included a formal complaint against Marcus Hoffman for conspiracy to defraud property owners through coordinated bureaucratic harassment. By 3 o'clock, Cyrus's phone rang. "Emergency hearing granted for tomorrow morning," Patricia reported. "Judge Martinez is taking this seriously. Hoffman's been ordered to appear and explain the documentation patterns." Friday morning arrived with unexpected visitors. At 8 a.m., Cyrus opened the door to find Marcus Hoffman standing on the porch, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman in an expensive suit stood beside him, along with 2 men who looked like lawyers. "Mr. Blackwell," Hoffman said, his previous confidence noticeably shaken. "I think we need to talk." Elena appeared behind Cyrus, followed by Patricia in her first public appearance since the inspection. Hoffman's expression shifted when he recognized the retired judge. "Patricia Reeves," he said slowly. "I thought you'd disappeared." "Disappointed?" Patricia replied smoothly. "I understand you have a hearing to attend this morning." "We all do." The woman in the expensive suit stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm Sarah Chen, representing Hoffman Development. We're prepared to offer you $200,000 for this property. No questions asked. Transaction completed today." $200,000. 400 times what Cyrus had paid. Enough to start over anywhere. Enough to never worry about money again. He looked at the faces of the women behind him. Rosa holding her baby, Maria with her files of evidence, Elena with her careful strength that had held this sanctuary together. "No," Cyrus said simply. Hoffman's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. The violations are real. The county will condemn this property." "The violations are fraud," Patricia interjected. "And in about an hour, you're going to explain that to Judge Martinez, along with your coordination with county inspectors." At 10 a.m., Judge Martinez reviewed the evidence Patricia had compiled. By 11 a.m., all pending violation notices against Cyrus's property were dismissed. By noon, Marcus Hoffman was under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and bribery of public officials. 6 months later, Cyrus stood in the same kitchen where he'd first learned the truth about the women who wouldn't leave his house. The house was now officially registered as Hope Springs Women's Shelter, with Elena as director, Maria as legal coordinator, and Patricia as board president. Cyrus had signed over ownership to the nonprofit they'd established, keeping only enough acreage for the small house he was building for himself at the back of the property. The 10 women who had refused to leave weren't squatters anymore. They were staff, residents, and volunteers running the first officially recognized domestic violence shelter in the county. Rosa was studying for her nursing degree through online classes. Maria had been hired as a consultant to review inspection procedures throughout the county. Patricia was representing 3 other families who had been victimized by similar schemes. Hoffman's development company had collapsed under criminal investigation. The properties he'd fraudulently acquired were being returned to their original owners or converted to affordable housing. Cyrus had found something worth more than the 200 acres he'd bought for pennies. He'd found purpose, community, and the understanding that sometimes the best investment isn't in what you can gain, but in what you choose to protect. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where justice meets courage in the American West. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you these powerful stories. Your support means everything to us.